General, ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for the invitation. It's great, it's a pleasure to be here in this beautiful city again. The beauty of the city continues in spite of being part of the European Union, which is for me almost impossible to understand, but nevertheless, probably I'm wrong. I underestimate the beauty and the contribution of the European integration process. So, thank you for the invitation. Nevertheless, I am not sure I am the right person to speak at the panel called Geopolitical Challenges. I know, and I don't hesitate to admit openly that my comparative advantage isn't in the field of geopolitics. This is, in my view, a field without a coherent theoretical structure, without well-defined hypotheses, which makes it difficult to say anything meaningful, strong, and resolute. My topic these days is Europe, perhaps the future of Europe, or better to say the future of us, Europeans. It's also a topic without any theoretical underpinning, but it is at least interesting and relevant. It's a part of our life and not just the topic of our doctoral dissertations or things like that. Something has changed in international politics in the recent era. I personally feel it very strongly. There are many examples of that, but for me, one interesting thing that this is now my third trip to Budapest in the last 4 months. This frequency is really very, very unusual. It used to be in the last 30 years, in the whole era after the fall of communism, it used to be something like 3 trips in a decade. Why is it so different now? I am not sure I have a perfect answer, but I don't think that the reason can be found in geopolitics, even though there has been important development there. Something has happened here in Europe, here in Central Europe, here in our societies. And this is what interests me. As I see it, the main issue has to do with the fact that one, I don't think it's correct to say small, but let's say medium-sized country, ceased to be a passive object of geopolitics and of the games which the Euro elites try to play with us. This country started to behave actively. This country is Hungary. To my great regret, only Hungary. In the preparatory documents of our today's conference, the organizers write, and I quote, that the Visegrad 4 countries are seeking new answers to the challenges of our era. This is a very friendly, polite, but undeserved statement. I am not sure it is true. I will start with my own country. I regret being forced to say that my own country, the Czech Republic, is not seeking anything these days. I know that my ambassador is here and he will immediately send a message to his headquarters in Prague. Nevertheless, I have to say that my own country is not seeking anything these days. We have neither a government nor a political leadership. Some of the Czechs, perhaps individually, try to do something. They seek to keep the very weakened and heavily endangered identity of the Czech state in the nation states liquidating European Union alive. But there is no government policy in this respect, neither explicit nor implicit. I don't have any mandate to speak on behalf of Slovakia, but it seems to me that the situation there is very similar, especially after the fall of Prime Minister Fico, after the recent events there, which reminded us of a sort of from-above organized coup. Poland definitely deserves attention and respect because it's an entity with a specific way of looking at the world and with specific policies in some fields, which I always find very refreshing. To my great regret, however, I found some Polish stances rather ambivalent in their geopolitical ambitions and consequences. Summing up, I do not see the Visegrad countries, the Visegrad 4 countries, to have enough courage, enough strength, and enough determination to pursue a common independent policy, to my great regret. It may have looked like a policy in the autumn of 2015, in the moment of the migration crisis, but I hadn't seen it before, and I don't see it now. When we discuss the Visegrad 4 countries, we usually rightly mention our similar, for decades-long experience with communism and with the Soviet imperial dominance. On the other hand, we politely and incorrectly underplay the historical difficulties this region used to have with Germany, which is another neighbor, which is something I consider a conceptual mistake due to a lack of firmness and resolution. We sometimes stress the threatening experience of these countries with the Ottoman invasion into our territories hundreds of years ago, but we don't often explicitly speak about our common experience with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I think all these four aspects should be taken equally into consideration. The Visegrad 4 countries undoubtedly represent a special case in contemporary Europe. This is true, but the question is the Visegrad 4 a real player in international politics? As an economist, and the economic science deal with the behavior of economic subjects or agents. Economics is not about tons of coal, barrels of oil, or the production of rice. As an economist, I am always, almost subconsciously searching for subjects, agents, players, because only they can have a behavior, only they can have an intentional and deliberate policy. That's my problem with geopolitics in general, and with Europe and Visegrad 4 in it. Is Europe, and similarly the Visegrad 4, a player in international politics? I don't think so. Europe is a continent, a civilizational and cultural entity, not a political one. The Visegrad 4, even less so. If not Europe, is at least the European Union a geopolitical player? Its leading political elites undoubtedly want the EU to play a prominent role in today's world. But is it really so? And do we want it? The almost half a century old Henry Kissinger's point when he asked about the European telephone number is still relevant. As I see it, the EU wants to be a geopolitical player, but it's not. I have in mind a real player, not a nominal one. In addition to it, all of us who live in Europe, and I only with a hesitation speak about us as of Europeans, we should explicitly raise the question whether the trio Merkel, Macron, Juncker should be allowed to speak in our name or on our behalf. My answer to this question is no, especially after the recent gesture of Mr. Juncker in Trier, where he more or less legitimized the legacy of Karl Marx. A continent doesn't speak, only people speak. That was some sort of introduction. Now a few comments, few unsystematic comments on the contemporary geopolitical situation. My point of departure is that something has changed in the first 3 decades of the 21st century. To say 3 decades is not a numerical error. I deliberately use number 3. Many authors consider the 19th century to last till 1914, and it seems to me that we can similarly say that the 20th century lasted only till 1989. We are therefore at the end of the 3rd decade. I will tentatively characterize the recent changes as I see it in the following way. First, the unilateral world of the early post-Cold War era ceased to exist, in spite of the fact that some irresponsible American politicians and public intellectuals of neoconservative nature, together with their short-sighted European counterparts, armed with an equally progressivist emptiness, try to bring the Cold War back, of course, inevitably, with all its potential disastrous consequences. Russia is back and behaves as a sovereign state, which means according to its own interests. In spite of that, I don't consider Russia a danger or a security threat to us. I know that this is an unusual and for some people in the audience a rather provocative statement, but I dare say that because it is true. To base a policy on an opposite view is in the most cases a substitute activity, an ersatz effort to hide the emptiness of one's thinking. The USA is infected by the virus of progressivism, originally more or less imported from Europe, but re-exported back to Europe now. I do believe, however, that the country tries to return to the roots of its original American success. This is, in my understanding, what Mr. Trump is aiming at. China has become a world superpower with or without its unnecessarily demonized Belt and Silk Initiative. We should accept that. China is here, and China is here to stay. It is difficult to say anything new or interesting about Europe. Everyone knows that the European integration process is in a crisis. It is hard to deny it. It is also evident that the artificial unification of Europe, the current ambition of the European political and intellectual elites, is not feasible. The people want to be free, not united. The available alternatives are not very promising. The Brexit killed the dreams of all European future of the EU. The French-German project of Europe has no chance to be realized because one partner is too weak to be a real partner. What remains is the German EU project as a way to legitimize the German hegemony, this time achieved without a war. But this is not what the countries, I don't want to speak on behalf of Hungary, but I put it here, like Hungary or the Czech Republic, are interested in. Europe is currently weak and shaky because of the prevailing EU ideology, which systematically undermines the traditional, historically proven building blocks of the European society. Three main building blocks. The nation state, by favoring regions to states and by attacking a nation state as the breeding ground for nationalism and therefore for wars. The EU ideology undermines the family by promoting genderism and feminism, by proposing all kinds of registered partnerships and same-sex marriages, by questioning the natural sexual orientation of men and women. And third, the prevailing EU ideology undermines the man itself, by trying to bring into existence a new European man. I call it Homo Bruxellarum, by artificially mixing citizens of European countries, and because it was not proved to be sufficient, by promoting and organizing the mass migration of individuals without European roots into Europe. One of my conclusions is, therefore, that Europe, represented by the EU, cannot play a significant role in the contemporary conflicts and disputes among the key world players. Another dimension of the current geopolitical uncertainties and tensions is the West versus the rest issue. The Western hegemony is evidently over. The Fukuyama's paradigm, even though he originally formulated it slightly differently and more cautiously, the Fukuyama's paradigm that the world has just one Western future proved to be wrong. We should accept it and come to terms with it, not keep denying it. Some Western public intellectuals try to continue promoting it as if its all original assumptions are still valid. They are not. This paradigm is definitely over. One of the main problems of our era is, in my view, the propaganda and the promotion of the ideology of universalism. The dispute we are confronted with is between those who accept the universalistic interpretation of the world and take it as a normative goal we all should strive to realize, and those who reject it, who see and respect the differences which characterize mankind, who don't want to make all of us uniform, who don't want to bring us all into a line drawn by quasi-progressive and would-be enlightened Western public intellectuals and their fellow travelers in politics on one side, and by obscurantist, pre-modern Oriental traditionalists on the other. This is a caricature of the world reality. The universalists deny the existence of any meaningful difference between the West and the rest. There exists, according to them, just one world community, one universal parenthood, one unstructured bundle of individuals belonging to the Homo sapiens family. This may be valid at the biological level, but not at any other, especially not at civilizational, cultural, or religious levels. I agree with Huntington's view that, and I quote, the people of different civilizations have different views on the relations between God and man, the individual and the group, the citizens and the state, parents and children, husband and wife, as well as differing views of the relative importance of rights and responsibility, liberty and authority, equality and hierarchy. These differences are the product of centuries. They will not soon disappear. This was Huntington. These differences can't be, and especially shouldn't be, artificially and violently eliminated. The West is in a crisis, and there are no indications it is going to end anytime soon, whereas the rest goes ahead much faster than we used to think and than we are ready to accept. We still continue to speak about the permanent wars and lacks of humanity there, about intractable political instability, about economic underdevelopment and hunger, about droughts and global warming, etc. But this is a misleading picture. Even worse, this is an intentionally misleading picture. In reality, we witness an enormous and undeniable economic development, not just in the well-known East Asia tigers or in the oil-rich countries. Almost unnoticed came the news a few days ago about the last electrified village in India. This is a great achievement. Even Africa is moving visibly ahead. It suggests that the mass migration does not need to be the overall feature of the future world, on condition Europe stopped its destructive policies. The Arab world seems to be in disarray, but the West should not underestimate its own role in giving rise to it. At the end of colonialism 100 years ago, and again quite recently, by Western absurd support, if not initiation, of Arab-colored revolutions. We shouldn't pretend to be uninvolved observers. My conclusions. I speak too long. Let me return to the V4 grouping. I have more questions than answers. Even though the Visegrad 4 nominally originated more than 25 years ago, has it become a real political player? Not nominally, but really. This is my first question. Is the Visegrad 4 sufficiently homogeneous in its interests? My second question. My third question, is the Visegrad 4 able to put through its own independent policies in the post-Lisbon European Union? My third question. And my final question is the Visegrad 4 project an authentic answer to the ongoing European problems and to the attempts to further de-democratize the European continent? My answer to all of them is a negative one. But as I said at the beginning, I am only an amateur in geopolitical topics, and I am afraid my speech demonstrated it sufficiently. Thank you for your attention.